me those questions. What was he doing? Yes, he wanted to know about sex and performance as an older man, but what he was really sharing with me is his anxiety and his fears. And what he's really doing is saying, I'm going to open myself up to you with the hope that you will respond to me about these very difficult issues in a way that's kind and I can gain something from. So he made himself intimate by opening himself up to me and letting me know who he was, and then waiting to see how I would respond. Now, I don't expect that alcoholics and drug addicts really do much of this. We're not seeing people necessarily as sources that are going to fill us. Our source is our drugs and alcohol. Our source is our casual sex. It's our disconnection. So, or our eating or other ways that we fill ourselves. If you're an addict, you know that one of the number one criteria is obsession or preoccupation with your drug or your behavior that goes above everything else in your life. And that means you're ruining your relationships, you're ruining your work, you're ruining, the things that matter to you by drinking and using or whatever you're doing. But there's a secondary gain to being an addict, especially a drug addict and alcoholic, meaning there's something that comes other than getting high or getting loaded. You don't have to deal with uncomfortable feelings. You don't have to deal with reminders of past trauma that might come up in a sexual or romantic relationship because you're loaded. However, when you're sober, many of us who have abuse, trauma, emotional challenges, neglect in our past, all of a sudden we're faced with ourselves sober, and someone is asking us to meet their needs. They want to have sex with us. They want our attention. They want us to, and we just run out the door on some level. Some of us go back to our addictions. But here's what often can happen with partners that we care about. And I'll talk about sex a little bit more in a minute. But I have heard a lot of people on my Friday night, 6 p.m. show on In the Rooms say, especially women, things like, I get close to someone and we have some great sex and we're really starting to get to know each other and this feels like this love thing is happening. And then 6 months or a year in, I start to criticize them. I start to push them away. I start to think, oh, well, they're really to this, or they're really to that, or they have zits, or they have warts, and all of a sudden I'm not looking at the fantasy of who they were, but I'm looking at the real person. Because when you're in early love, early excitement, early passion, and we have a word for this, by the way, it's called limerence, Limerence, and it's the name for that biological, and it is biological experience where we're beginning to get close to another person and we start to feel like they're wonderful, and moonbeams and starlight, and we tell every single friend about who we've learned, who we've started dating and love. That is a bond. That's bonding. It's not love. It is neurochemical bonding. It has biological, and I can tell you the hormones that mean when I'm looking at someone who might be a potential partner and we're looking dreamily in each other's eyes, that my brain is releasing chemicals that are very similar to the chemicals that a mother releases when she's looking down at a newborn child. I am bonding with that person. But once that bonding period is all over, what nature expects is that we're going to be close enough and trusting enough and care enough that when the issues come up, we will work through them. So we don't need to have that level of intensity all the time. We only have it in the beginning so we can overlook each other's challenges and begin to bond despite them. But once we've bonded, all their challenges come up, they become real, and we get scared. Now they can abandon us. Now they can hurt us. Now they can let us down. And in situations like that, we tend to start, those of us who have kind of histories that I have, we tend to kind of pick on the person in our head and push them away. Sometimes we pretend that everything's fine, but we don't. It isn't. We don't have sex with them. We don't want to get near them, and we don't know why. And I can tell you 75% of the time, if not more, it's because we never learned what love and intimacy was, or our experiences of love and intimacy were so problematic, so unfulfilling, so painful, that somewhere inside of us, we said, I'm not going to ever make myself vulnerable to that again. I'm not going to ever let somebody in who's going to hurt me. And I know, and this is the addict talking, I know what it's like to get close. Let me say this for me. I know what it's like to get close to people. In my earliest experiences, I had crazy people that I was getting close to, and they were unpredictable, and they were confusing, and they hurt me, and they used me. And so those were my most meaningful, important learning experiences about relationships and intimacy, were the people who raised me, who they were to each other, who I was to them, who we were as a group, all of that. So if you had a shitty ride coming along when you were younger, it's unfair of you to think Number one, that I'm going to be able to just have a free ride into relationships and sexuality. I'm going to pick the right person. It's all going to be great. That's not likely. The problem is we get sober and we can't find a relationship, or we find the wrong people all the time. And then we blame ourselves. What's wrong with me that I'm always picking the wrong person? What's wrong with me that I can't get close to someone? What's wrong with me that I reject relationships that might be healthy, but I find myself running away? And all of that, all of it, here's a good one for women. How come when an important relationship breaks up and I'm really sad, I go use? Why do I relapse over relationships, which is a big issue for women? Well, let me tell you, even though we're not aware of it, I'll say it this way. If you think about little toddlers, 2 or 3 years old, little babies, they really need us for survival. And here's the 3 things that little babies need from us. They need food, they need shelter, and they need love. And if you don't nurture them with shelter, they don't survive here on the beach in California. Even though we have nice weather, you don't leave babies on the beach. And babies have to be fed, and they need to be watered, and just like a good plant. But they also need to be loved. They need to be cooed and thrown up the air and played with. And, they need to be told they're special and need to have their diaper changed. They need to be consistently attended to. And that is the nature of how they develop their experience of what intimacy is and trust. What is intimacy and trust? I learned that from the big people who raised me. Do I trust them? Are they consistent? Do I believe that my needs will be met if I ask them to be met by this big people? These are the samples of how we learn, the examples. But some of us walk into adult life with those kind of histories and expect ourselves to know how to do what healthy people do, which is pick the right person, have a few bad relationships, find the right one, have a little too much sex at, up to 25, and then settle down into relationships. I mean, that's sort of what healthy people do. We struggle with those things. We struggle with all of it. And so I wrote a few notes down. I want to refer to them. What do drugs and alcohol buy us? What is the secondary gain other than getting high? And I'll give you a few things. I wrote these down. Drugs and alcohol bury pain. I do not have to experience pain. I don't have to be reminded of pain. And if I'm using a lot, I can actually take all the unhappiness in my life and blame myself. So I turn it all on myself. And what is the reason that I hate myself? Because I'm drinking and using. So I go round and round in this cycle of hating myself. Drugs alleviate anxiety. So I may not be sure how to connect with someone, have sex with someone, feel comfortable letting them in emotionally or physically, but when I'm sober. But give me a few drinks and man, I'll do anything. Because why? Because all the fears, all the tension, all the concern about sex and letting someone in emotionally and physically goes away when you drink and use. Drugs and alcohol are disinhibiting. Right? Guys know this. We give women or men, whoever we're dating, a few drinks before we try to get them to go home with us if you're in a bar. Because we know that if someone has a few drinks, they're going to maybe make decisions like, yeah, I'll go home with you, that they wouldn't have made sober. And those of us who pick people up in bars know this. We get them drunk and then we go home with them, or at least we have a few drinks. Alcoholics, drug addicts, and regular people. So you already know that using alcohol, drugs will make it easier or reduce your inhibitions around sex. So disinhibited, disconnected from your fears, from the losses that you may not even know you've had, you will back away. You will distance yourself.